recently got acquired by Cloudflare. There was also an offer from another fund, but you decided to go with Cloudflare. What were you thinking?
It's interesting you're asking me to start with this part. I've been dying to actually talk about synchronization is going to be a very, very big thing across multiple devices, across multiple players, across multiple entities. You are going to be collaborating with more AI agents slash people. But things that build up context are 100% going to become a part of how we work and interact with other people in a professional context. If the product you're giving doesn't depend on some form of compute, storage, or inference that you sell, then where exactly is the business? A lot of people who got into developer relations, the one thing which I really hate, they took over the conference and meetup scene. How do you build a community? I don't know, the same way you build friends, I guess. Like,
Hey Sunil,
hi Rishabh, how's it going?
very excited to have you. Sunil is the founder of Partykit, which recently got acquired by Cloudflare, and now he's continuing the work of Partykit on Cloudflare. Sunil, do you want to quickly just talk about what Partykit is?
It's a product slash platform for building real time collaborative applications. Building something like a Google Docs, Figma, or even like just a multiplayer game. It's been like very hard and expensive in the past, and Partykit took that and made it very cheap and very easy to build. And I tried the tech out, and I was so impressed with just building it myself that I was like, hey, I need to get this into the hands of everyone.
You started, I think, about a couple of years ago, recently got acquired by Cloudflare. How did that come about? So, full disclosure for people, I am also an investor in Partykit.
So it's interesting you're asking me to start with this part of it because people are otherwise usually interested in the starting the company, but I've been dying to actually talk about the end, not the ending, the next phase and what's been happening. So yeah, earlier this year, look, over the last year and a half, just the very nature of building not just building applications, consuming applications, people's expectations of what application should be has just changed in the last 2 years. You can call it hype, you can call it whatever you want, but like the LLM thing is real. Like everyone's fundamentally rethinking everything. So in the middle of that, to be building technically a non-AI company, and the combination of these five things, so open source, B2B, SaaS, infra, VC backed, very bad combination, bro. Well, not bad, very challenging combination, because it's definitely a bit of a grind. While I'm still the number one believer in the technology and the capabilities, I must have underestimated the kind of growth it might have had in year one, year two, which is again fine. But I have a roadmap which is roughly about 5 or 6 years long. So then earlier this year, Cloudflare started a conversation with me. So for context to anyone who's listening to this right now, I worked in Cloudflare before between 2021 to 2022. I helped them rebuild their developer tooling CLI and a bunch of libraries and stuff like that, which is why Partykit was in fact is completely built on top of Cloudflare because the secret sauce is durable objects. So I've always had an incredible relationship with them during my time in Cloudflare through Partykit because I was talking to them all the time. I was literally building the company there. Rishabh, you might know that the CEO and an SVP were also angels on the Partykit cap table.
Of course.
So like I had such a great conversation. So when they reached out and they're like, hey, listen, like we think you've built something like actually special here. Do you want to come into Cloudflare and continue building it? Because one of the challenges with the tech has been how do you tell a story around it? The number one thing people ask about durable objects is, okay, fine, it sounds cool. What do I build with it? How do I actually do something with it? And I think Partykit was one of, definitely not the only, but one of the efforts that actually pierced that, actually got people to try out the tech and build things and ship to production and make them understand what the technology was and wasn't good for. So when I started that conversation, I was like, okay, fine, like chatting is free. But it ended up in a place where I thought this is probably the best thing for the product and the platform to survive and grow. Like I said, like there's such a long roadmap ahead of it. It's very novel tech, and I'll be honest, being able to focus on building that without worrying about, I don't know, enterprise sales in 2024 was very, very appealing as an option. So that So then like it moved like really quickly because they're like, hey, we'd love to announce it in time for developer week, which was in April, I think. And really the paperwork got signed like 2 days before the actual announcement. Like it was just like balls to the wall, getting it like really close to the thing. And the last few months have been amazing because they got me into the company to continue building Partykit, to figure out the roadmap myself. It's not like they got a senior engineer and like, okay, now you're dealing with like this one small component in our giant company. No, they actually want me to build out the rest of the service, and there are a bunch of product plans around it. And I can talk a little bit more about that. But getting back together with friends and colleagues that I actually like and continuing building in the context of this and really having the freedom to think in a slightly more long term has been pretty great. It's been pretty
So,
nice.
couple of follow-up questions on
Yeah.
that. You obviously had some pretty well-known institutional investors on the cap table as well. What was the conversation with them like, especially in the context where you had a couple of other VCs sort of wanting to invest in the next round? And the second part was also around there's obviously a bunch of other companies in the market that you could have considered, or as we call shopping around, right? Like how you do during
Exactly.
fundraising, during M&A, it becomes even more sort of important. Any reason why you didn't go through that process and just decided to go with Cloudflare? Especially like, I know a couple of other companies, leaders were also on the cap table. So it's not like access would have been a problem. You pretty much know everyone.
I was being courted by a few other very big funds, mostly because, well, Partykit was still doing well. There was nothing about it that was doing badly at all. People liked using it. The tech works, which is actually quite unique for
It's awesome.
year
Yeah.
one, right?
Yeah.
For a tech startup to be like tech that works and can scale immediately.
Yep.
So people would come up to me saying, "Hey, we have 100,000 users." I'm like, "Yeah, that's like not a problem at all. Million users, yeah, bring it on." Like really, it's like, can Cloudflare scale? And I'm like, yeah, of course Cloudflare can scale. Like it powers most of the internet right now. So the conversations with them, and then of course with my existing investors, my lead was Sequoia, who I had a great relationship with. I still do. And I think the conversation, Sequoia have been like great partners despite being like such a massive fund, right? Like I have a dedicated partner, hi Bogomil, and really valued not just my time with them, but almost like what they brought to the table. But even they were like fully supportive of it. I mean, truthfully, like they believe in the founder, and if the founder says, "Hey, like I don't think this is the right thing to do," they can't really force you to keep going. Hell, I was feeling bad that I'm not able to like return all the money in the pot and stuff
100x
like.
returns that.
Right, exactly, right. And they were like, dude, like you're like a pre-seed investment. It's absolutely fine. It's not a material difference for us. And when you do make another startup in the future, please let us know. I was like, yeah, okay, fine. Regarding shopping around, you know what, man? Like I wonder nowadays. So I didn't shop around. Like I just didn't speak to anyone else. And that was because company and the platform and the roadmap is so very dependent on this tech that no one else has. The other places to shop it around wouldn't have been other providers, but potentially downstream big customers of Cloudflare itself. I don't have to name anyone. Like I said, I didn't really speak to any of them. But the fact that I had previous relationships with these people, and when I say previous relationships, I mean like the reason I even got into Cloudflare in the first place in 2021 was because I was dissing them on Twitter because I really didn't like their developer experience. Like I was saying mean things about them. So they got into my DMs and they're like, "Do you want a job to come fix it?" I was like, "Okay, that's an interesting perspective." So I did. So I didn't really think there would be a better home. Would I have gotten more money elsewhere? Maybe. That's the whole point of shopping around. But that's not really been the motivation here. I think it really boiled down to that. Like, how many percentage points can I change the outcome for myself personally when it didn't really matter? What I really cared about and why I even had the conversation was, how do I give a home to this thing that I can at least 5 years, if not more, focus on building it? It's really as simple as that.
That's very interesting. So on the building part, let's talk about just, what are your current thoughts on collaboration? Because obviously a big part of Partykit is around imagining the future of collaboration, right?
Hmm.
Things like Figma, things like Google Docs just seem like it feels like it's been around for a while. And now with the growth of things like AI agents, one can imagine that, collaboration doesn't even mean that it needs to be with another person. Gaming has had collaboration forever, but just like from your perspective, this is where you put the visionary hat on and tell us that how do you foresee a collaboration on the internet?
So this was the easiest pitch when I was actually fundraising for Partykit, because the first line of the pitch was the future of the internet is multiplayer. And the reason that everybody got it is because this was the original design for the internet. There's nothing fundamentally different about what I'm saying. This was always designed for collaboration, and it has delivered to a big extent. I don't even want to like underplay the kind of impact the internet has had on our lives. It's not like it's not
Lol.
one, right? But the insight was that actually true real-time collaborative tools like your Google Docs and Figma, those are the two standouts, right? It is not a coincidence that it has taken multi-billion dollar companies to build experiences like that. And the reason is not as obvious as you might think. So, one, in traditional serverless programming, you can't really build stuff like this. You need stateful servers. That suddenly means that and to do it well, you need to provision hardware effectively across the planet. Because to have like low latency and a good experience, especially at times when there's a lot of load, etc. Okay, so suddenly the cost of the infrastructure is like expensive. It's a lot. Second, to write the applications, you need to be distributed systems experts. You need to deal with systems that are happening in different parts of the world, messaging arriving across the order. You have to provide like a consistent view into these things, which
Can
leads
you can
to
you before you carry on, just because we have different kinds of audiences, can you just in a layman's terms explain what stateful servers are?
um, Uh, okay, so let's say you want to write an application with a big button that increases a counter. Okay, it says zero, and every time you click it, it increases by one. And everyone has to see the same thing. Everyone can click the same button and increase it. If you had to write a normal program to do this right now, you would say, hey, have a variable, call it counter. And anyone sometime clicks this button on event to counter plus plus. You're able to write this and run it on your system, and it actually works on your own laptop. But the moment you put it out there into the world onto a server, it doesn't work. Everybody actually starts seeing zero. They'll click and it'll increment only like for themselves. In fact, if they don't look at it for 5 seconds and they refresh the page, it'll be back at zero. And the reason for this is serving infrastructure across the planet is actually built on what's called a serverless model. They don't spin up a computer for this one application and keep it alive. Instead, they spin it up for a little time to serve your website. And once there's no activity, first of all, when there's no activity, it'll shut down again. And second is they'll spin up millions of these little computers depending on where you're visiting the website from. This is the most common method of deploying applications now in the world. So we call these stateless containers or stateless what have you. Like it just spins up, and it's great for a lot of a lot of use cases. So the way you get around it then is saying, okay, fine, let's store this state in a database somewhere, something like MySQL, Postgres, Redis, one of whatever. And now you need to be able to scale your database as well, because if a million people are hitting your database, then it'll fall over. So now you need to replicate this database across the planet and make sure that everyone who's looking at this website at the same time are seeing the same number. This is what I mean by saying it suddenly becomes a distributed systems problem.
And
For
you're like, I'm
as
just trying to build a counter, man. Like I'm not
Bro,
trying to.
I'm telling you. So this is the big problem. I'm telling you the simplest use case. Here's a counter. It's not Google Docs, text, games, Figma. No, like I want a counter. I'm saying that becomes a multi-million dollar effort if you try to deploy it successfully on Monday, once you built out a prototype in 10 minutes on Sunday night.
Got it. So coming back to your
Right. So
vision of collaboration.
Right. So, okay. So, building these systems, it took a lot of money for hardware. You need subject matter experts, and then you need to also hire people to maintain these systems. So, if you put four senior engineers, add up their salaries, etc. So, this has been the problem always, which is why you will see a lot of kids. And when I say kids, I mean like teenagers or people in their 20s, because now anyone in their 30s is also a kid to me. That's a whole other conversation about growing up in tech, but we'll do that later. They will build like a game on the weekend and they'll see what it takes to deploy it, and they'll be like, yeah, I'm not shipping this. There's no way that I can afford this or do it or whatever. But over the last 3 or 4 years, some very specific things have happened. That's why the timing of building this tech is important. One is Cloudflare has invented tech like durable objects, and Drifting in Space has invented plain.dev. And I suspect other providers will build other things as well. The nature of there are now open source libraries that are available off the shelf for you to build applications like this. So, a big one that in the space people know is something called YJS. It helps building interactive text editors very, I don't want to say easy, but straightforward. It solves the hard problem of the consistency when people are editing the same text at the same time. So, open source and the desire. COVID did that, bro. The moment COVID happened, everyone started working from home. Everyone became distributed teams. And you're not putting that genie back in the bottle. CEOs are trying to do that every day, but I'm sorry. When we say distributed, right? It's not even like across massive time zones. Look at us. You and I are in different parts of London right now, but it is clearly more convenient to drop a Riverside FM link instead of
Yeah.
renting a studio for 2 hours and said, no, this is just like, let's just get on the laptop and like record it.
Yeah.
So the desire for these applications has suddenly like jumped up a lot. So, and then like you said, right, like a collaboration now doesn't just mean working with people. Now we have, hey, I want to spin up an AI research agent that I'll talk into my phone and say, hey agent, can you go find the 5 best ways of cooking a mushroom stroganoff? Take those 5 ways, make one recipe with it, choosing the easiest parts from it, and ping me back. And you put your phone away. The putting the phone away part is also important because that's why you need a stateful container. It's not it's happening in the background somewhere else.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is not a very complicated ask, especially if you're not a techie. You're like, that sounds fine. What's so hard in making a computer do that? But
But
it
like
involves.
the kinds of collaboration that you're talking about, for example, if you look at companies like Asana and all these project management tools, Miro, Notion, everybody has it, right? Like, it. I mean, that's like productivity collaboration where it feels like everybody has it. Like if you're building any kind of a document productivity software, obviously you're able to invite other people, Miro and stuff like that. Like it seems like what's the big deal?
One of the challenges we had to overcome with Partykit was kind of explaining this thing. And the answer is that you shouldn't need a third party service or app or rely on their functionality to build it. You want it in your. What's happening right now is the great bundling of services again, right? You don't, it happens like, for example, people will be like, hey, why do I need to use TLDraw multiplayer? All I can do is just share my screen. And you're like, okay, fine, that's fine. But then the moment you need a second person to edit it, or literally you want to do anything that this third party service, excuse me, that this third party service doesn't provide you, you're screwed. If you're not able to add this into your existing application. And that's what's happened. The surface area of the number of apps into which multiplayer could be added is many orders of magnitude bigger than the number of applications and services that give you multiplayer features today. Let's take something like Figma, right? Let's take Figma itself. Right now, the Figma is now trying to get more developers to use it, which is why they have a dev mode, variables, all of that jazz.
Yeah.
But until Figma does it, you still have to do handoff. Hey, designer does a bunch of this thing, sends you the link, then you take it and you work on it. First of all, why can't I add Figma into VS Code? Why can't I build my own Figma? Why is it so hard to do that? And the answer for that today is, okay, let's take TLDraw instead. But then you add like stuff to TLDraw yourself. I think that's basically the answer, which is that sure, there are a handful of applications, very successful applications that let you do collaboration, but those exist in a space outside of the things that you're actually building your workflow. And for UX reasons, regulatory reasons, etc., you kind of want to be able to add these features into existing applications. That's kind of the pitch here, which is that, hey, we're just going to bring it out to the next billion applications, and you should be able to add it with a few lines of code without investing in hardware, without subject matter experts. Literally, NPM install these libraries and start augmenting your apps the way you want to.
Got it. And so if you were to take this, like, what do you foresee like collaboration or multiplayer to be like 4, 5, 6 years from now? This is more on the product side. So obviously so imagining that if the technology exists, the core technology exists, what kinds of end applications do you think that'll unlock, which might either have been too hard, or like I'm just imagining like if everybody could build a Figma, you have that kind of power and resources available, what will the next few years look like? Have you thought about any of that kind of stuff?
One of the insights that we had is actually every user actually is multiplayer, whether they like it or not. And the reason for that is that we are multi-device, and it's actually annoying to see something on your phone and on your desktop and they're not the same thing. As an example, email, like it would be weird, and Google spends a lot of effort and money into making sure you do this, which is if you don't see the same email in your phone and your desktop, especially when a new email comes, there's sometimes a little bit of lag, etc. Synchronization is going to be a very, very, very big thing across multiple devices, across multiple players, across multiple entities. I mean, the entire local first application space is driven by people who believe synchronization is the way to go. They're moving away from REST
Yeah.
APIs and other GraphQL APIs. They're like, no, just synchronize the data that you need. And in a space like that, push-based architectures like the ones Partykit push for are just going to start dominating. Again, it's this whole ratio of static pull-driven architectures to push-driven architectures is going to change. That's one thing. Second, like it or not, you are going to be collaborating with more AI agents slash people. Of course, we are going to give them human like personalities. That's why chat is such a popular way of interacting with LLMs, like it or not. It's because everyone kind of knows how to yap. And here is someone who will listen to your yapping without ever complaining. In fact, they'll apologize if they get it wrong, and they get it wrong a lot. Spinning up a little army of people to do things for you. The one thing that is going to be it's going to be a hard problem, but I have no doubt it'll be solved within like 12 to 24 months, is these AI agents will start building context as you start giving them more data. Like imagine like every employee in a company has an AI buddy that has complete knowledge of all the Git diffs that you send, all the emails you write, all the wiki pages you write, and can start developing like an opinion of the way to speak to you, the way to encourage you, the way it can answer your emails for you from somebody else. This context, I don't know what some people call it RAG, but it's like a little different from RAG. But things that build up context are 100% going to become a part of how we work and interact with other people in a professional context, without a doubt. Bro, like within 12 24 months we are all going to have email responding buddies. I think Google will give it to you as a service. They're
Yeah.
like, would you like us to reply to your emails? Anything that looks normal, we'll just reply. Anything that seems important, we'll ask you to reply. That'll be Google Inbox V2, and then they'll
Yeah.
kill it in 36 months.
I think that's going to be an interesting, this whole concept of having a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
Today, it's more like autocomplete and stuff like that, or like put a trigger if I'm out. But like, imagine like if it's just able to have a conversation and ask questions and stuff like that. And like,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's just absolutely going to happen. So,
What about developer tools? I think the last 5 or 6 years, a lot of excitement around dev tools. A lot of people still continuing to build dev tools, but the interest seems to have waned. Or maybe it's just changed more to the same category of dev tools, but now for the AI infra and things like that. But like, what are you seeing? Because obviously you hang out with a lot of other engineers who are also building dev tool startups. Like, uh, why do we do this? It's so painful. At least
it's
that's
so
what it
painful.
feels like at this moment. Because I think somewhere there's this entire movement where everybody was building dev tools, nobody knew who's going to pay for it. Eventually most of these things were paid by the enterprise, but the dev tools hook was, let's get PLG, early adoption, open source, whatever, let's get a bunch of people and then we'll go hire sales guys and then eventually we'll go sell it, right? But like, what are you seeing?
I have a number of thoughts here. First of all, I think DevTools as a path to riches has gotten a lot narrower. You have to be like very specific. First of all, you have to be someone who actually cares about the business and making money to make money. There was always the hope that as building a dev tool, for all you need to do is win the hearts and minds of developers and it'll work out. Sorry, that's just not true anymore. It's just
What?
um, yeah, like it or not, I think, bro, like if you're trying to build an open source company, you need two hits. You need two massive hits. The open source project has to be a massive hit, and whatever company slash product you build alongside it also has to be a massive hit. That is, and the days of free money are kind of gone. It used in VC terms, companies would be valued at like absurd multiples of their revenue, and now that multiple itself has like gone down dramatically, like which is why there are just fewer IPOs. There are fewer mergers and acquisitions in the space. And even if the acquisitions happen, they happen at a much lower level than.
So when you said that if we just build something which developers love, that's not the way to do these things anymore. Can you dig a little deeper on that?
Sure. Not only are developers are still cheap, they refuse to pay for stuff. In fact, they're cheaper today than they ever have been, simply because they've been spoiled, at least in the JavaScript world, by having everything not just provided to them cheap, and when I say cheap, I mean free, but also with great design. And like that's the like if you have a developer, if you have an open source library today that doesn't have a well designed landing page, then no one's going to use this. Imagine saying this to developers 30 years ago, that you need to have a beautiful landing page. They're like, I'm putting a post up on Usenet and I'm forgetting about it. If people want it, they take it. No, it's completely different game now. If the product you're giving doesn't depend on some form of compute, storage, or inference that you sell, then where exactly is the business? Someone needs to explain this to me. I see this with a lot of people. In fact, not only does it have to be dependent on compute, storage, inference, it has to be so drastically important for a company to use it that they're willing to pay a number above, a lot more above what your costs of the compute, storage, inference are. This is the I feel bad for people who don't like get this and get it to the company. Let's talk about another thing that you were mentioning, right? Which is that publicly people, especially founders of Devtools companies, they keep tweeting and saying that things are amazing. Things are amazing. Look at the traction that we have. Look at these graphs. You and I both know behind the scenes, all of them are shitting it, bro. If they're not an AI company, they're struggling to raise the next round. Either they raised too much in 21, 22, so which means they're finding it harder to raise the next round at a higher value, or they're not an AI company and they're struggling to raise the next round. And if they're not showing hockey stick growth, and I mean like hockey stick growth, people will be like, we'll do an extension if you want, but as a friend. Like I know so many founders, I know enough companies who have shut down in the last 9 months, and it makes me feel bad because some of them are truly great products. And the reality of the matter is, there is building a great product, and I mean great products, and then what is the business that sustains the company? And if you're on the VC path, I'm sorry to say this because I love my VC friends, I love the partners that I've had, but their expectations on the kind of growth, the kind of returns that company has to generate for you. And if you can't do it, you're probably better off bootstrapping. You can build not just a healthy, but a very profitable business if you have the hunger to build it and you try to be smart and do it with fewer resources and fewer people. But bro, if I put 5 million in your bank, the thing you're going to do is go out and hire 5 people, right? And you're not even sure why. But
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I'll hire the 5 best people. On the face of it, there's nothing wrong with it. Can you imagine giving money to someone and then saying, don't spend it? Don't spend the
The
money
the
on the best people possible.
doesn't matter how much you raise, you have 18 months of runway. If you raise 1 million or you raise 100 million, doesn't matter the stage, 18 months you have to finish it.
I love this. What a great phrase. Yeah, it's true because that's your appetite increases based on the
Your
capital
appetite
that you have to deploy.
increases, the people who've given you the money will push you towards spending it.
Yeah.
Maybe that
So
18 might have become 24 months, but like it's not more than that. Like you can't keep it for for
forever.
5 years. So
So
sometimes when people say, right, like early stage companies, they say things like, yeah, our burn is just $10,000, so we have 80 months of runway. I'm like, bro, like maybe think about how you want to position it, because if you say it that way, your VCs will be like, okay, great, let's go hire 30 people.
exactly.
So
Uh,
so
so
yeah.
I'm sorry. Like I feel so bad. In fact, I think the ecosystem is learning this right now, and the reason that you're seeing more people move towards AI is because there's still capital there. Not still capital. There's capital there right now. People are still doing $5 million seed rounds and stuff over there.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're building something, you're like, okay, let me do it, or let me phrase it as an AI play. Let me say that it is, I don't know, AI driven code lending. Sure. Oh, no, actually, there are a couple of great AI driven code linters. This was not a sub this thing at all. Like I'm just saying that you'll take something and just throw the word AI at it. I've
Yeah,
bro, like I've been dying to get the sunilp.ai domain for years, man. He
that would
refuses
be
to sell
so
it to
cool.
me.
Oh, so there's
He,
there's there's another Sunil Pai who has it.
yeah, unfortunately, he refuses to sell it to me. I offered him like $4,000.
So let's shift
Yeah,
gears to open source. It's obviously a big discussion in both AI and non-AI lands. A lot of developer tools, startups that we've seen start off as open source. A lot of large companies obviously are spending a lot of money in open it, as well as you were part of the core React team that you keep
that's
on
right.
reminding everyone that you don't like to talk too much about. Do you advise startups who are right now thinking about their go to market? Would you advise them to go open source? In which cases should open source be viable? Is it a ideological thing? Is it a commercial decision?
Sorry to phrase it in like such a cold-blooded way, but if as a company you're deciding to do open source, it better have strategic value for you. It either has to have strategic value for you, or it has to be almost about like commoditizing your complements. Definitely don't open source the core stuff that you have unless it's like very meaningful that it'll do something. In this day and age, if you do actually open source the core of your company, somebody else will, and by definition take it, run it on their own infra, and take it for free, which suddenly means that you end up in a place where you're like, okay, fine, we need a commercial license if you're using this for commercial purposes, which is actually, I think, a good thing, and more companies should do that. But a lot of people will get mad at you and say that's not true open source. I'm like, fine, it's 2024. The days of free lunches are done for. But anything that's not on the critical path, especially like just developer tooling for your product, or just libraries that help you accelerate and go out there, you should not do it because you think it'll give you cred in the open source community. Unfortunately, that's not true anymore. I actually don't know why. It used to be that as a company, if you had like polished open source out there, it would translate to revenue for you. It's not true anymore. So what? So if
which
you're
is which
going to
is which is true, right? Like I don't think, because I noticed this as well, buyers don't really care whether it's open source or not. Like
no, not anymore.
I don't think, and I don't think they've cared for like a long time. There'll be some CTO who might, but again, there it might be more from a compliance or security perspective
Exactly.
versus really like an ideological thing.
Yeah. And that's just it. The reason to not do open source is not because you're being secretive. It's because to do open source well takes a lot of effort. It's You can't just chuck the code over the side, right? It's a thing of maintenance, of polish. People will come up to you with use cases that you don't have, but you almost kind of have to land it into the open source project. And it takes a bunch of time and focus away from you when you are a 9-month old startup that has to grind every day on your own thing. So, if you're taking time away from that, and ask yourself, what is like 20% is one day of work, dude, every week, at least. So, how much of your time are you willing to spend on the open source parts that you now have a responsibility for maintaining because you put it out there? Because what's worse than doing open source is doing open source and then just not touching it, right? Like just throwing the
What
code.
about the reasons you normally hear, which is that, hey, the feedback cycle is much more faster. You get to PMF much more faster. You don't have to go through this whole technology adoption life cycle curve. On day one, you can have like a Google or a Tesla using you. I mean, these are, we sold these stories,
It's
right? Like,
very these are very old stories.
yeah,
The way to
exactly.
do that nowadays is go and speak to your damn customers, reach out to them, get them on a call, give them a scheduling link, go to their office. I'm not joking, by the way. Like, free hack for people who are listening to this right now: you can just meet people and do things. Like, you can just find out where they are and be like, oh, there's a meetup happening and this dude is going there. You can DM them and say, hey, can I get like 10 minutes of your time and show you something I'm working on? People are way more helpful than like you imagine. And that kind of feedback is actually 1,000 times more valuable than some dude who used your open source thing and expects like paid, who expects support in by saying, why have you not fixed filed an issue for 3 days ago yet?
Yeah.
Sorry, like there are hundreds of better ways to get like feedback now on the products that you're building. Number one of which is get it into customers' hands and then talk to them.
What about
A
large
lot.
companies doing open source? Like, in fact, I was just discussing this in another founder group that I'm a part of. And, there was an entire discussion on how if something is open source, it's actually better if there's like a large company behind it because they're more likely to be good custodians of it. Like, think of all the large projects that Meta has released over the years, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
not just one, like React,
PyTorch.
PyTorch, Llama.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that now Microsoft, like, who would have thought Microsoft being a good custodian of open source, but
So weird,
but
bro.
look at it now, like it's the hottest place where you could house your open source code. Cloudflare,
Man,
of course.
there are
So
20-year-olds not in the world and who might listen to this podcast who don't know what life was like,
they have
dude.
no idea about Bill Gates before he was a
Yeah.
philanthropist.
Man was the public enemy number one at
Exactly.
one point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like what are your thoughts? And now obviously, I mean, and you've spent time in both Meta and Cloudflare, both in fact, even Mintra, I think Mintra back in India has done a lot of work towards open source,
Yeah.
quite open to it. So do you feel like large companies are actually good custodians of open source
No.
because they put money, like there is some selfish interest, of course, but like they probably end up doing more good to the broader community in proliferating a technology.
Probably just a survivor bias thing. Look, the reason that the companies you named are good at open source is because there's a top-down motion to say we should be good open source citizens, especially in Facebook. They get by making PyTorch and React open source, there's actually strategic value in that, which is if they build a great open source project, support it, and have impact on the world, for them hiring great front end people and ML people becomes so much easier, like dramatically easier.
Yeah.
And they know how to convert people into money. So if they can get the best people, so it's strategic for them. Cloudflare, we open source the parts of the company that are almost not on the critical path, which is weird because our JavaScript runtime is open source. And for the longest time, when you ran the developer CLI, it would actually spin up a remote session on the network when you were building workers. But then now we are in an age where the JavaScript runtime is not the actual competitive part. In Cloudflare, it's the network. And that there's nothing to open source there. It's basically how do we open source 300 cities and 10,000 cells. But if a company doesn't have a top down thing to say we are going to invest in it and we are going to dedicate specific people to it and it's their job to do this well and they will be rewarded if they do it well, those companies, if you don't have that, then you're not going to see it. It doesn't matter what amazing open source people you hire, and which is why there are so many companies that use open source. This is the thing that kind of bothers me. There are trillion-dollar companies that use open source but don't really contribute back to the community or do it well. Number one of them is Apple, bro. What open source stuff do they have? And it's annoying as hell. They open source the browser, I guess. Is WebKit their big open source success?
Right.
Yeah. No, but no, like, so would I actually trust open source that come? I guess this goes to your question. Would I trust open source that comes from Apple? I don't think so.
Right.
I would be actually worried. Well, oh, they also open source Swift, but then they fired the guy who made Swift. He's building another programming language now. It's called Mojo, I think.
Yeah.
Latner, Chris Latner. So I think, so to answer your question, I don't think that's actually true. The list of companies that you have are only because those are the companies that have top level motion to say we will do it well. There's the opposite of it, which is there are a lot of much smaller companies that do a lot of great open source work. It's like just the React ecosystem is filled with hundreds of companies that do so much work that is also super critical, that keep the system almost like alive. So I don't know. I don't think it's the just the company size. It's really a question of whether it's part of the culture to care.
Interesting. So, okay, can't do open source doesn't have the same value for startups as it did
Wow,
earlier.
it's such bad news to say these things, but it's just true.
DevTools is not as exciting as it was once upon a time. How do you get your product in the hands of others? One of the things that people have spoken about is community. So they're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
let's build a community. Let's hire this role called devrel. And I hate to break everyone's bubble, but Sunil is not a huge fan of devrel either. Yeah, man. Share more about what we were discussing last week. Like, where did devrel lose the plot? And why are you so pissed off at that entire ecosystem?
Okay, I have so many reasons about this. One thing that I started noticing happening in about, I want to say 2018, around that time, is companies started offering the role of devrels to people who would have been called technical writers a few years before that. I have a lot of respect for the job of a technical writer. It's what makes it accessible to everyone, and it's the sort of thing that people might refer to 100 times in a day, like your documentation. But they started calling them developer relations people because, sure, it sounds like a better title, I guess, and it's easier to hire for that. That's one thing. Developer relations is such a broad umbrella that it's actually hard. It's like saying software engineer. Software engineering is such a large umbrella, and there's, at least in software engineering, there's some kind of understanding of leveling, but I don't think anyone has really means, right? Outside of their engineering responsibilities, a lot of people who got into developer relations weren't even judged on the engineering capabilities, which is fine. I actually don't have a problem with that. But then these people, they did the one thing which I really hate, which is they took over the conference and meetup scene. Yeah, you know what? This is my number one problem with DevRels. I don't know if you know this. Back in India, in all the way until about 2017, I was heavily involved in the JavaScript community. I used to work with a group of people called HasGeek, who I think are still
Of
amazing.
course, Kiran is
E-
awesome. Yeah.
Exactly. Kiran and Zainab are my big time heroes. I used to help them organize the JavaScript conference JSFoo. And we had rules. We are like, you're not allowed, the number one rule was you're not allowed to shill a product there. You're not allowed to sell on stage unless it's a sponsored talk. If it's sponsored talk, you can do whatever you want. But even if you work for a company and you're giving a talk, you're not allowed to say on stage, hey, use this product that at a company mad at you if you did that. We gave opportunities to people who were experimenting, who were trying something new. We said if it belongs in a blog post, it won't be a talk. We are happy to publish your post on the HasGeek blog or whatever it is at the time. And that, it wasn't just JSFoo, by the way. Like, everybody did this. Meetups and all were about colleagues and peers presenting their work to each other. But then devrels came along and they basically made it like sales pitches. And these are very talented public speakers, bro, which is why not only did they do it once, they'd go and give the same talk at 10 conferences around the place. You do that with 100 of these people, and all these conferences start getting taken over by big chunks of products, and very few talks are actually about experimental work. And the reason that you do this is, as a conference organizer, is that it's easier to get sponsorship, especially at a time when sponsorship started struggling as well. COVID almost like killed it. So the big reason that I hate no, I don't hate devrel. The effects of devrel is that they ruined like the conference meetup scene, and they made people talking more about like products and third party services instead of actually interesting experiments and things they were building. That's another thing. Devrel is definitely a ZERP phenomenon in the fact that very few companies know how to measure the impact of their work. This is a very bad problem. And that's why I kind of knew that once this whole layoffs, etc., started happening, Devrel people would be the first people to go. Why wouldn't they be, right? Hey, let us look at all our cost centers, which are the ones that have the least impact. What is, some non-technical person will be like, what is this devrel stuff? What do they do? Well, they handle our community Discord. Does that generate revenue for us?
Why are we
They're
paying them
like,
$200,000?
why are we paying them a full software engineer's salary? And it's one thing to say, well, because of them, we managed to generate an uptake in so and so this thing. But not only do you not have that number, but you weren't even judging the devrel on. I think I was mentioning this to you last week. Great companies that do devrel attach devrel to their marketing team. They understand that it is a content marketing, etc. play. That, and these are the goals. How many tweets can you get? How many clicks can you get on the link? You can say this is not important for software engineering, but then be clear that those are either software engineers or they're in the job of content marketing and getting people through the door. But companies don't do either, man. It dirties the place for everyone else. These people are, the biggest sin that an engineer can do is not discuss the trade-offs. And as a devrel, you are incentivized to not discuss the
I think
trade-offs of your
I
solution.
think devrels and heads of devrels find it almost disingenuous if they are part of marketing. Like every time you hear them, they're like, yeah, you know what, we should either be part of product. That's typically what, or engineering, but not marketing. Like, can you think of any devrel person who would enjoy reporting into marketing? Like, wouldn't it like destroy their street cred in front of their
Eh,
buddies?
You know who would enjoy it? I would. No, that's just it. At least make it explicit. Or no, that's just it. If you're not, then you should be a part of product. Are you doing the job that, like, are you actually supporting product? Are you bringing feature requests? Then you have to discuss trade-offs. My point is that it's actually so nebulous, right? It hasn't been really attached to one of these functions. And in during a time when the money is free flowing and no one's like, they're like, yeah, it's fine, business as usual, it's fine. But when things get hard, I'm sorry, buddy, you're the amongst the first people who are going to get cut, unless you have such a strong story and such strong impact that people are like, will leave you alone. And that's what I mean. The great companies, the companies who do great devrel, it is very obvious. I'll tell you, the company that does great devrel is Vercel, because they understand what they're there for. They're not an early stage startup anymore, but they're a startup. Their job is to get the technology into people's hands, actually get feedback. I think Lerob is, you can give, he'll start up a thread saying, hey, what can we do better, and he'll have 200 responses by the end of the day, and then 3 months later he'll follow up by saying, here are the top 10 things we took from that list and fixed for you, etc. Like, so he does that also. But no, it's very much a job of, this is the age of AI. Look at what my team has built with this tech on Vercel, and this is why Vercel is good for it, etc. So you have to acknowledge what your job is. If you can't say what your job is, or if it is something nebulous like keeping our community happy, sorry, in hard times you are going to be the one that suffers.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate that this is the truth also, by the way. I'm not even saying that it's the right way or the wrong way to do things.
Yeah.
Of course you want to take care of the people that use your product, you want them to achieve success, etc.
So what is the right way to do community then?
I can only say the things that work for me. I don't know. I don't actually have a good answer, but I can say the things that work for me. One is sharing your work early. I think one of the things you might agree with this. Engineers actually don't like being sold to. Uh,
Of
they
course.
especially don't like being sold to in uncertain terms. Can your landing page actually be very clear about what it is you do, and ideally what it is that you don't do? And can you solve like very specific real problems for me? If you cannot be clear about that, then you're not going to get your time. So you kind of have to lean into that. I think that's what people mean when they say authenticity. They don't mean share your emotions. They're just like, remove the bullshit and just tell me exactly what the product is. What is the API for it? I'll decide whether it's good or not. You don't have to tell me that it's good before I even use it. Go to hell. Everybody's saying that. Everybody says, it's something Partykit also says, it used to be very difficult and expensive. Now it's cheap and takes only very few lines of code. There is no startup that doesn't say these exact things.
Yeah.
Of course, Partykit believes it. It's true only for Partykit. So I think showing your work often is a good sign. Showing your work working in real conditions. That's why, like, I tweet so much about hey, here's a link of the thing actually working. Here's a Steve Ruiz actually calls this GIF driven development. I love that. Show a damn GIF of the thing working. How do you build a community? I don't know. Same way you build friends, I guess. Like, you actually have to like put in the work. Wow, this is kind of a hard question because I actually don't have a good answer here. Even though I think did a good job of it myself. I just constantly kept sharing my work and putting it out there and actually like speaking to a lot of people and like kept making it better. And I still do it today. Like, I constantly speak to users. You know what? Yeah, a lot of tech people don't do that. Maybe that is the answer. Like, and not in a small way, not
I
in
mean, they
like a
might think that, hey, like they might, it's so easy for them to look at you and be like, hey, man, you've got like whatever, 10,000, 20,000 followers on Twitter. Like, I don't have
yeah.
any of that stuff. Like, how can, it's easy for him to say that I just went and spoke to
Yeah,
people.
but truthfully, I've taken 15 years to build this this many thousand followers, and I've done that by grinding, like non-stop grinding. If you're listening to this podcast looking for a shortcut or a hack, sorry, like I think the actual, I know so many founders who raise the money and almost disappear for 6 months, and instantly I can tell they're going to fail because I'm like, oh, once you come out, then you have to do 6 more months of effort actually talking to customers and seeing what you built. Why don't you do that on day one or day two instead? The
Hmm.
number of people who don't speak to their users or customers, and I mean really speak to them, I mean like really, it was one of the joyful things in Partykit for me that I would get like have days of back-to-back calls with users and customers, and I loved every moment of it. And I wouldn't complain about having back-to-back meetings. Then it gave me like energy. I would end the day saying, holy shit, that was such a great day of work.
Hmm.
And only much later I realized that not a lot of people do that. They're like, I'm just going to hire a sales guy to do that. Let me hire a devrel person to do that. And I'm like, nah, man, like if you don't love your users, how can you expect anyone else to? Uh, yeah, love your users, man. Like they're the ones who like take you to places. People think building a community is about here's a Discord link and we'll do like technical support for you. And sure, technical support is part of it. But actually, genuinely wanting your users to succeed is something you either have or you don't. There you go. That's my answer. That's a much better answer. I didn't realize when I went from being the youngest person in the room to being the oldest person, but I still feel as enthusiastic about tech and the things I care about today as I did 10 years ago. I really hope I can keep that for the next 10 years.
Well, on that note, thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Sunil. I know we've been coordinating for a while. So awesome to have you.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot for this again, Rishabh. Best of luck.